what it is that that's holding them back, or that's making them feel that heavy weight, like that burden that we carry when we hold on to something and we don't want to talk about it, or we don't want to.
Well, I think
process.
that emotional clutter has a lot to do with how much energy we have to spend on handling the things that are coming at us. And if we're carrying a lot of things with us, then it already kind of takes a big gulp out of our energy to start the day. So if we're dreading the fight with the kids that we have every morning for getting dressed or eating cereal or whatever the battle is, that's the systematic battle, you know that's so many tablespoons of your juice that you have every day that you are giving up. And then if you allow that, it can ruin your day, because then you just start getting angry and negative. And then the whole day goes to crap, and you wonder who's in charge. And then the only way to really figure out who's in charge is to look in the mirror, and then there's your ugly mug staring at you right back in the face, and you realize that you're in charge of that decision.
Mama says namaste. Mama says namaste.
1, 2, 3.
Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in, then let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.
Welcome to the Mama Says Namaste podcast. I'm Ashley Logston, joined by my awesome husband Nathan as my co-host and partner in life. As we RV the states full-time and unschool our girls, we invite you to not only hear our story, but create your own. Join us in our binge-worthy seasons, where every week we'll take you from chaos to clarity by understanding personality styles, bringing awareness and intention into your home, not waiting for one day, and highlighting how the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Let's get started. I mean, so often when we think of minimalism, it's just getting that feng shui and that beautiful clear house. And I mean, if you think about that clutter of the heart, when you're feeling all of that heaviness and you come into a house that's full of clutter, it's like everything caves in around you and you feel kind of overwhelmed, because everywhere you look, inside and outside, there are these heavy thoughts and these heavy things, and it's chaos everywhere. But on the flip side, say you go all minimalist on your house, you clear it all out, and it's a, IKEA mecca and looks beautiful and clean and pristine and feng shuied, but you feel that same heaviness on the inside. Then you look out and you're like a boulder in a sea of emptiness. It's just not just about eliminating things in your exterior life, in your physical life. It's really paying attention to what you choose to carry with you on a daily basis inside.
Well, and I think that when you're going through the process of downsizing and minimizing, you kind of go through a process of pulling things out, looking at them, and deciding what their value is to you. Do I keep this with me? Do I carry this? Does this add value? Does it bring joy into my life or the life of others? And what's the purpose of it in my life? And can I appreciate it and realize that somebody else may be able to appreciate it more by letting it go? And I think our feelings are that same way. We have to go through them, pull them up, and kind of give them their due, because they're not going to just disappear.
You did such an amazing thing with Juliet the other day. when she completely lost her mind on the beach. We had had a very full day. We get down to the beach all ready to go and play, and it was freezing cold. There was a huge fog, so you couldn't even see where anything was. We make it all the way down to the water. First thing she does is get covered in salt water. And she's cold, and her legs are stinging, and she's exhausted, and she just loses it. She's 5, and she just couldn't take it any longer. And this was all, I wasn't down there yet. And so you had a talk with her. And do you remember what all you told her?
No. I have a lot of talks with Juliet.
Yeah. Well,
Resonated. Was it hugging her feelings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It resonated with her because on the walk back, I got down. As soon as I get down there, I saw her and she's like, I'm done. Checked out. Cannot handle this. And I knew that it was time to turn around. And so we went and we started walking back, and she is just crying her heart out and just upset and feeling everything. And she told me, she settled herself down. She took a few deep breaths, and she turned to me and she told me, Daddy told me to hug my feelings, and I've hugged them, and I'm okay to let them go. So now I've reset, and I'm good now. And I thought, how amazing that she was able to grasp, not denying or stifling those feelings, but hugging them, and then saying goodbye and letting those not be carried with her for the rest of the time. By the time we got back to the end of the trail, she was singing at the top of her lungs and skipping all around and perfectly fine and oblivious to the fact that she's wearing soaking wet, freezing cold clothes.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, sometimes we have every right to just get angry and pout. But we also need to recognize when getting angry and pouting starts to become the theme of our life. Mm-hmm. It starts to become what we look for in life. It starts to become the reason sometimes we talk to people and approach people. I was listening to something about connection. I think it was Brene Brown.
Probably.
And we were listening to one of her books, and she was talking about how criticism is such a easy way to connect when you can connect in criticism. Mm-hmm. And it's easy to do. We've talked about that on other podcasts. When you hear people that come in, they have dinner together, and they're just unpacking about how crummy their life is.
Mm-hmm. One thing compounds on another.
Oh, yeah. And so then you start to approach the world that way. Mm-hmm. And you start to see through those lenses. And once you can clear some of that clutter out of your way, and you can let go of that anger that you hold, mm-hmm. man, the world is such a beautiful, amazing place if you allow it to be.
Mm-hmm. Just simply, we've focused a lot on just the perspective shift. I'm thinking about what happened in our campground this week. So we're here in Ocean City, Washington, and there are at most of the Thousand Trails campgrounds, they have these horrible spikes at the exit so people don't come in the exit and try to sneak in. So it's their security gate thing. And it's these huge spikes where, you cannot back up. This one, it's kind of a hard exit, and you got to make sure that you don't roll back at all when you're leaving, because you'll puncture your tires. And we came out the other day, and there was, what was it, a Blazer or something?
Yeah, it was a Ford Explorer. So it was an old late 90s Ford Explorer with 3 different brands of tires on it. And they were all bought used. And this poor person had just driven through the exit and had not known those spikes were there and slashed 3 of the 4 tires. And it just didn't look like the type of car that could afford to put new tires on their car.
So that's the story that Nathan wrote, and he's looking at it and telling me how it just breaks his heart that he knows that the cost of what it would be to replace that, and how that's, that just completely ruined someone's day. And this guy walks up behind us, he's been around for a long time and is very jaded on life.
He said that's the cost of safety, mm-hmm. is what he said. And said, what an idiot for not being able to read.
Yeah. And he just got, it was just that immediate assumption that was some jerk, trying to come in and break into a trailer park.
Campground. Right. Well, and, we all have a chance to write a story when we see things. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times when we have muddy water, when we have a lot of baggage, a lot of emotional things, they all kind of have a say in our head in many ways and have some influence on how we see the world and how we interact with the world.
Well, right, because we can hold on to our past to dictate our future, where if we've had a previous experience with something, when we're faced with something similar, we're going to expect that same experience. Like having a previous experience with somebody that's a different race or a different culture or different sexual orientation or anything else, and you have some kind of negative experience, and then you go ahead and write that story for everything in the future that you do, or you carry that weight of shame or guilt or hatred or anger, and then that leaks out into your future. So, I mean, the more you carry with you, your past becomes your present because it's right there.
Right. Well, and I think that it's hard to deal with, when you have those same battles or those same challenges or the same frustrations that come up over and over and over again. Those are great opportunities to retry how to get past that. Mm-hmm. And usually what it requires is, if it's with another person, it requires one of you to let go and take another path. To let go of your ego or your need to be right or your need to control a situation or your need to, be in power of a situation.
Or be the hero.
And do the opposite or do something different or approach it very differently, where maybe
if the same story keeps showing up again and again, then
that's your
what
sign.
Lesson do you need to learn?
I mean, I remind the girls of that all the time. If we have the same battle come up, there's a lesson to be learned in it. Mm-hmm. And either it's for me or it's for you. But always be aware of those little crumbs, because those little crumbs can lead you down a path that is absolutely amazing, can change the way you see the world and the way the world interacts with you. Because I really believe that, there's power in positive thinking, and there's power in seeing the good in the opportunity in a situation. And I think it requires clarity to do that. It requires letting go of all the things you want done perfect and right.
Yeah, I mean, if your mind is too full of fog, you're not going to be able to see to move forward. Just like us walking out on the beach the other day, we couldn't even see the massive dead whale right in front of us because the fog was so thick.
But
still the same beach regardless, but
right.
When that wind blows where it flows through and you see that, I mean, that flow is such a beautiful part of our lives. It's not getting stuck in the stagnant water, but it's allowing all of those emotions to flow through you and understanding there's a season for it. And those emotions that we tout as the bad ones or the negative ones, those are the ones that, like Helen Keller says, if it weren't for the shadows, you wouldn't see the light.
Yeah. Well, I think that what's so important is to give yourself the grace to feel some of those feelings. It is okay to be angry. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be frustrated. But it's not okay to go and spread that and expect everybody else to feel that same way because you're there. And I think we forget that a lot of times, and we want people to be at our same level so that there's a level of understanding. Mm-hmm. We want to connect with people ultimately, but sometimes we forget how to do that efficiently.
Or we just follow the lead of whatever starts. So one person starts down that negative path, and then it just, it becomes that snowball effect where everybody adds to it because of our need for competition or to have a voice or say something, and so we each add on a different story.
So how do you stop that cycle? How do you get in front of that?
Well, that's the end of this episode.
Cliffhanger. I think that there's a lot of different tools there. I mean, I think that just starting to catch it starting to have awareness of it, starting to know and recognize the feelings that come up so that you know what's coming instead of responding quickly is the first step. And then giving yourself permission to have those feelings and
go hug your feelings.
Go hug your feelings. Just give them their due. I mean, that's one thing that I realized when I was going through an extremely painful experience in my life was that, these feelings were not going to go away until I gave them attention. It's kind of like a crying child with a skinned knee on a playground. All they want is a hug and a Band-Aid, and they're back in the game. But they're not going to move past until they have that.
Because if you just ignore it, that's such a great point. And if you just ignore it, what does that do to that little child?
It gets louder.
That doesn't get that comfort. Well, I mean, you see the scientific studies and those
old
research studies
about
babies that weren't touched and how they don't thrive. And so it's one of two things. Either they shrivel up or they start to look for that attention in a negative way.
Well, and then if you're not thriving and you're with a spouse, they know you're not thriving. They feel that. And so that brings that relationship down. And then your kids know you're not thriving. And so it's so important to take care of yourself and to deal with that emotional clutter so that you have the clarity and the cup to be able to give to people.
And the focus and intention on how to set your day and how to prepare for what it is that you want to do. To make sure that you are not, waiting for circumstances to push one way or another, but that you're setting that path and being intentional about what you carry with you.
Well, and I think another tool is to start to practice dealing with those uncomfortable situations. Emotions are never convenient. So they're not going to show up. And so if you need a few minutes to gather yourself, practice how you would do that. Practice in the mirror how you would do that so you are not set up in those situations where you're going to go to your default, but you have a new out. And that you might not use it, you might not, hopefully you get the opportunity to play with it, but that kind of, scripting yourself on how you can get yourself to a place. What I mean by that is if you just need to get out to a hall to take a few deep breaths so that you can come back into a conversation, clear-headed.
That may make such a shift for what goes forth after that and what the connection and the communication ends up being.
And it might strengthen the relationship in the long run. But being able to tactfully remove yourself so that you can have that moment if that's what you need is so valuable.
We don't practice that much. And we talk a lot about, setting that family vision and that intention. And voicing what our dreams are and our expectations and communicating these things with one another. And another aspect of that is practicing and is actually going through doing some role playing in a scenario that may be difficult. Role playing it out and talking it out makes it easier and easier. And
or even having an agreement with the partner where you say, I'm getting to that space again.
Yeah.
And just having the grace, not using it manipulatively. You've got to be very careful there. Because that's, sometimes you can have situations where people just use that to get what they want. There's got to be a closure there. You've got to be working towards a goal of eliminating that. But just having that permission of, I need a break. Or when you do this, I feel this. It's important for you to know. I don't like feeling this way. How do we move past that?
And I think that it's important as far as that acknowledging if you're getting to that space again. If there is something where you really need to pull away and take a minute to reset yourself or anything else, make sure that you make a commitment and a promise to come back to the conversation. Because that's where distrust happens, when it's seen as a cop-out and a way to not deal versus it being a time to take a break, to regather yourself, and to then come back to it.
Well, because you need to, my kids tease me because I can think on the morbid side of things a lot of times, but it's really important to recognize that you might not have the opportunity to mend a relationship or present yourself in a way that is healing or adding to a relationship. You might not have that opportunity to do that. That person may leave before you have the chance to do that or to make that right or whatever that is.
Yeah, it sounds.
And so every interaction that you have is really important. And I know it doesn't feel that way, but you can experience loss in a half second that will completely wreck your world. And we watched a documentary on the money behind medicine a couple years ago, and it was filled with people who were making poor medical decisions based on a bad relationship, so that people really suffered or were financially suffering because of a relationship that they wanted to mend, and they were hoping that somebody would come back from a stroke so that they could have that opportunity to say they were sorry, to say that it wasn't worth that, because they didn't have that opportunity when they had the chance. And if you approach life in a relationship in that way, and that's kind of why I see us having such a tight and close relationship on a daily basis, is because you don't have that opportunity. Mm-hmm. Or you don't know. You're not guaranteed that opportunity tomorrow.
And we have lost people throughout our lives, both separately and together. We've lost people that we never anticipated them being the ones to go.
Yeah.
And in experiencing that, that's when those things become personal. I mean, I shared 2 episodes ago about losing a family member to suicide, and I remember before that, people would joke all the time, say the cliche, oh my gosh, I'd rather put a gun to my head or I'll kill myself, and saying it just in sarcasm. And I never thought anything of it. But after that happened, I remember my cousin talking to me and telling me how she couldn't handle that at all when people said that. And I started noticing it. And it was at a time when we were all grieving. We'd hear somebody say that, and it was like a dagger to us.
Stab, yeah.
Where it was us just feeling that, the irony that we say a dagger, and that's a trigger for someone else.
Right. Well,
and that's the thing, when it's not personal, you don't think about it, but those things that we say trigger things in other people, and sometimes those things that are triggered are things that they haven't been able to process through or let go of. And when I had such a hard time through that, and when my cousin had such a hard time with hearing people say that, it was a time where we weren't ready to give grace for that it wasn't their story. We were at a time that did nothing but just well up that pain in ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Not anger for the situation.
Right. And now we've talked about it since, and we have an understanding that that's not their story. They don't recognize that as a trigger in their own lives. And we can say that because we've been able to process and grieve, but still not end our living and our existence because of this pain either. So we chose to not carry it with us.
Well, and these can be difficult topics because a lot of times we will drag pain into a relationship. And it creates areas of taboo. Mm-hmm. It creates areas that are off limits or not allowed. And we've had those areas for periods of time in our relationship where we didn't go there very often. One thing I'm thinking about on the same suicide note is gun.
Yeah.
Guns, as we just didn't touch that because we knew that was sensitive and brought up a lot of painful feelings. But we couldn't stay there forever.
Right.
There were issues that had to be addressed.
Right. We were raising children. We had 2 different mindsets. For me, it's avoid guns at all costs, hate them, don't ever talk about them, don't discuss them or anything. And Nathan's was growing up in a hunting environment where gun safety, and you learn guns so that you know how to use them with respect and to be careful around them.
Yeah. I mean, that can be a situation that can wreck a relationship.
Where neither one of us want to budge, and we're holding on to our own choices
right.
in our own history, our own sense of right, and in my situation, my own pain.
Right.
And I held on to that as this taboo. Don't touch this conversation with me.
And I think I remember when we were addressing that together, I recognized that verbally. I said, I know this hurts, and I know this is not a place that is easy for you to visit. And I know it probably comes from a space of not fully understanding as well. Mm-hmm. You didn't have education for guns. You didn't know anything about them other than this experience that wrecked your world.
Right.
And we've both changed a lot.
Yeah.
In our own opinions of that. And I think that, that's the other thing that you have to have when you're cluttering or decluttering your heart is grace for people, what they're hanging on to. Mm-hmm. Sometimes you just got to hang on to it until you're willing to let go of it. When you watch people go through severe pain and they really are dealing with loss and regret, they usually go and take themselves back to that space over and over again and drink that poison water again and revisit that experience again over and over and try to figure out what they could have done differently or how they could have prevented it. Mm-hmm. But you can never go back. That pain is there. And so you have to learn how to deal with it. As long as you choose
to walk with it.
As long as you choose to walk with it, bring it up and have it be what you bear. It can be...
I'm thinking about that even tonight, reading A Swiftly Tilting Planet with the girls. We have just absolutely loved the Madeline L'Engle Wrinkle in Time series. And so we're in A Swiftly Tilting Planet. We just finished it tonight. And one of the characters came back from war, wounded, and would not talk about it. Was in a deep depression, pushed away his betrothed and his twin brother, wouldn't speak to anyone. And he carried that pain with him for like 4 months. And finally, he goes to his brother, and he says he's ready. And he opens up. And he goes through the whole story of the war and what all he carried with him. And he just opened up completely to his brother and cried and just, grieved through what he dealt with. And then told his brother that he was ready to start anew and to go to this new colony. And it was just one part of the story, but I thought how beautiful that she captured the fact that it wasn't just this twin brother came back scarred and chose to run away from the home he knew. It was the twin brother came back and he was he carried the heaviness of pain so badly that he couldn't see for the weight on top of him. And when he was ready to move on, it wasn't just that he left and to carry it with him, but he had to process through it. He had to grieve, he had to cry, and lift that burden and let it flow on out.
Yeah, I don't think you can ever erase those things. Mm-mm. But you can replace them with a new perspective and a new way of looking at things.
Right. And, I can never get my cousin back. Yet through that pain, I have a relationship with the rest of my family that has grown deeper through our heartache. I have a respect for the sacredness of life that I didn't have before. And I have more of an awareness of the grieving of others through experiencing that in our own family.
And that's powerful because, that allows you to have the clarity to invite healing into that relationship. And once you recognize that, you can have that choice and that power to help somebody turn towards that. And, as a partner, we all know those things that are those triggers. Mm-hmm. When you've been with somebody long enough, you know those trigger points and you know how to push buttons. And you can choose how you respond when somebody's dealing with those heavier things.
Yeah. Sometimes space is needed and sometimes...
Grace is needed.
Grace, sometimes support. And...
sometimes silence.
Sometimes silence. Yeah. But there's so much in this world that there's no way we can take it all. We can't accumulate everything, and we can't take on every emotion and experience all at once. We have to pick and choose. We have to be selective. Everybody is, regardless of whether you want to or not. There are boundaries that are created just for the sake of this is the way life goes. And the more that we can be intentional about where those are and really look at what we bring into our lives, into our home, does this add value and purpose and joy in our home? Or
in
does
our
it weigh it
relationships.
down?
Yeah.
And then, and then in our relationships and in dealing with one another and with our closeness to ourselves and who we are. And it's our relationships with ourselves and with others. And really being able to lighten the load of what we carry with us. So we let things flow through and hug our feelings and wave them on, knowing that there are more to come and we can't take them all at once.
Yeah.
And then lightening the clutter in the head of just what is really important. Recognizing the scarcity of life and how precious it is, and that we can lose it in the blink of an eye. And so these people that we look at every day and this home that we live in, I mean, this is our life. What are we making of it? Look around and really just take a moment to appreciate the things around you. I don't know that there's necessarily a challenge this week as much as just an invitation for introspection.
Give yourself a hug.
Give yourself and your feelings a hug. Journal it out. Talk it out. Go on a walk on the beach and yell it out. Do whatever you need to do to hug and let go and let them flow out of you, and just think about that opportunity to lighten that a little bit. And give grace for others and where they're walking in their own path.
As muddy as it may be.
That's right. Because
the uniqueness in each of us strengthens all of us. Namaste.
1, 2, 3. Up with the rising sun, already on the run. Mama says namaste. Life is a tangled mess, and you don't have to stress. Mama says namaste. 'Cause today I will stand up and be all the change that I want to see in this world. Boys and girls, you gotta have to stand up to be free. Namaste in your heart. Take a deep breath in and let's start a brand new day. With Mama says namaste.